The 1970s were a time when music didn't just push boundaries, it shattered them. In this era, before the internet and streaming, radio stations were the absolute gatekeepers of sound. They held enormous power, capable of making an artist a global superstar or silencing them completely with the flip of a switch. And when they decided a song was too controversial, too political, or too sensual, it could destroy a career before it even began. But sometimes, something strange happened. Sometimes, being banned by the establishment was the greatest thing that could ever happen to a song. The forbidden fruit always tastes the sweetest, and the controversy didn't kill these records. It turned them into legends. So today we're taking a journey through the most shocking stories of musical censorship from a decade on fire, exploring the forbidden anthems that the powers that be tried to erase. The 1970s didn't just sound different, it felt different. A huge part of that feeling was the sound of liberation, the unapologetic sound of sex blasting through speakers, and no one terrified the censors more than the artists, who dared to put female pleasure front and center. In 1975, Donna Summer was a promising singer, but it was one marathon of a song that launched her into the stratosphere. Love to Love You Baby wasn't just a disco track, it was an event. The infamous 17-minute extended version, designed for the sweat-soaked dance floors of underground clubs, was built around Summer's sultry, breathy vocals. The controversy exploded over what the press dubbed her 22 simulated orgasms. Radio programmers were horrified. They imagined families in their station wagons, listening to what sounded like audio erotica. The song was immediately deemed too explicit for daytime listening, and many stations banned it outright. Religious groups and conservative advertisers launched campaigns against it, with the Catholic Church itself issuing statements condemning its explicit nature. But the ban had the opposite effect. Public curiosity skyrocketed. If they couldn't hear it on the radio, they would find it themselves. Record stores were flooded with people seeking out the full, uncut version. The controversy didn't just make Donna Summer the undisputed queen of disco. It helped establish disco as a movement that challenged sexual norms and celebrated a new kind of liberation. But if Donna Summer's American hit was a whisper of sensuality, a French import from a few years earlier was a full-throated scream. Je t'aime, moi non plus. The duet between French provocateur Serge Gainsbourg and actress Jane Birkin was a scandal in a bottle. The track featured such explicit moaning and heavy breathing that it left absolutely nothing to the imagination. Originally recorded in the late 60s, its notoriety exploded in the early 70s as it crossed over to British and American markets, causing an immediate uproar. The BBC banned it instantly, calling it offensive and grossly indecent. The Vatican newspaper condemned it as obscene. Across America, radio stations refused to touch it. The song's foreign language only added to its mystique, making it sound even more illicit and forbidden. It became a massive underground hit, a record people would ask for discreetly in stores, a secret shared between those in the know. The band cemented its legendary status, proving that sometimes the most powerful promotion is a total prohibition. But if open sexuality was one battlefront, a full-blown war was being declared on the entire establishment by a new snarling sound from the streets of London. Forget subtlety. In the mid-70s, a musical Molotov cocktail was about to be thrown directly at the heart of the British establishment. Britain, in 1976, was a nation on edge, struggling with economic decay, labor strikes, and social unrest. Into this volatile atmosphere came the Sex Pistols, with their debut single, Anarchy in the UK. It wasn't just a song, it was a declaration of war. Johnny Rotten's snarling delivery of lines about destroying the established order represented everything that terrified the British elite. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a threat. The reaction was swift and brutal. The song wasn't just banned, the band was effectively blacklisted. The BBC refused to play it, and most commercial stations followed suit. Things escalated when the band appeared on a British talk show and unleashed a torrent of profanity on live television. The incident became a national scandal, known as the Filth and the Fury, turning the Sex Pistols into public enemies overnight. Government officials condemned them, Newspapers demanded they be silenced, and venues canceled their concerts. But that was only the beginning. A year later, in 1977, they unleashed their masterpiece of provocation. As the United Kingdom prepared to celebrate Queen Elizabeth II's Silver Jubilee, a nationwide event of patriotic fervor, the Sex Pistols released God Save the Queen. The timing was a deliberate act of cultural treason, with lyrics like God Save the Queen, the fascist regime, and She Ain't No Human Being. The song was a direct assault on the monarchy itself. The BBC's controller called it an act of gross bad taste and banned it immediately. It was forbidden on every mainstream radio network in the UK. Workers at the pressing plant initially refused to handle the vinyl. Record shops that stocked it faced threats and boycotts. The band members themselves faced physical violence on the streets. Despite the total media blackout, the song sold in massive numbers. It soared to number 2 on the official UK charts, though rumors have persisted for decades that the chart was manipulated to keep it from the number 1 spot, to avoid the embarrassment of having an anti-monarchy anthem at the top during the Queen's celebration. The band turned the Sex Pistols into martyrs for artistic freedom and made them international symbols of rebellion. The Pistols attacked the system head-on, but other artists were chipping away at cultural norms in ways that were just as revolutionary, even if they were dressed in glitter and sung with a smile. What happens when a pop song introduces a topic so taboo the censors don't even know what they're banning at first? When the Kinks released Lola in 1970, it faced one of the most bizarre censorship cases in music history. The BBC banned the song, but not because it was a groundbreaking story about a romantic encounter between a young man and a transgender woman. They banned it because the original lyrics mentioned Coca-Cola by name, which violated their strict rules against product placement. The band's frontman, Ray Davies, had to fly back from a US tour to re-record the line, changing it to the generic Cherry Cola. Only then would the BBC play it. But once the song crossed the Atlantic, American radio stations focused on the actual subject matter. A story that treated a gender-bending encounter with humor, warmth, and acceptance was deeply unsettling to conservative programmers. Many stations refused to play it during daytime hours, worried about explaining its meaning to confused parents. While Lola played with ambiguity, Lou Reed's 1972 masterpiece, Walk on the Wild Side, was a direct, unflinching documentary of a world most of America didn't know existed. The song was a tribute to the characters from Andy Warhol's legendary New York studio, The Factory. It told the real stories of transgender pioneers like Holly Woodlawn and Candy Darling, referencing drug use and sexual acts in a casual, matter-of-fact way. The line "and the colored girls go do-do-do" was often misinterpreted and censored, but the real issue for radio was the song's unapologetic celebration of marginalized communities and alternative lifestyles. Most stations played a heavily edited version that cut out the reference to oral sex. Many banned it entirely. Its subject matter was simply too far outside the mainstream for 1970s radio. Yet, despite the censorship, it became Reed's biggest hit, a timeless anthem that introduced millions to stories they would have never heard otherwise. While Lou Reed and the Kinks were exploring the fringes of identity, a powerful new voice was rising from the very center of the mainstream, demanding to be heard and terrifying the male-dominated establishment. In the 1970s, one of the most dangerous things you could put on the radio wasn't sex or anarchy. It was a woman's unvarnished perspective. When Helen Reddy released I Am Woman in 1972, it became a rallying cry for the burgeoning women's liberation movement. Its powerful lyrics, "I am strong, I am invincible, I am woman," were an affirmation of female strength that resonated with millions. But music executives and radio programmers were nervous. They saw the song not as music, but as a political statement that was too charged for the airwaves. Some stations banned it for fear of alienating their male listeners and the advertisers who catered to them. Religious broadcasters objected to what they saw as a challenge to traditional gender roles. The resistance was intense, but the song's momentum was unstoppable, eventually hitting number 1. Reddy poured fuel on the fire during her Grammy acceptance speech, where she famously thanked God because she makes everything possible, a statement that only deepened the controversy and cemented the song's place in feminist history. But if Reddy's pop anthem made the establishment uncomfortable, a song from the heart of conservative America caused an absolute meltdown. In 1975, country music superstar Loretta Lynn released The Pill. In the traditional, family values world of country radio, singing about birth control was scandalous. The song was a cheerful, defiant story of a woman celebrating her newfound reproductive freedom, no longer tied to constant pregnancies. The backlash was immediate and severe. Dozens of country stations refused to play it, calling it immoral and inappropriate for their audience. Religious groups organized protests and letter-writing campaigns. Advertisers threatened to pull their support. The song stalled on the charts due to the widespread bans, but Loretta Lynn, a mother of 6 who had married at 15, courageously defended her work. She argued that she was just singing about the real lives of millions of women, and that country music was supposed to be about the truth. Her willingness to stand by the song, despite the commercial cost, made her a true pioneer and proved that no topic was off limits. These women were banned for speaking their truth directly. But what happened when an artist's truth was so layered in satire and metaphor that the public completely missed the point? Sometimes, a song is so clever, it outsmarts its own audience, leading to outrage for all the wrong reasons. In 1977, Randy Newman released Short People, a song with a bouncy, cheerful melody that masked a deeply satirical message. The narrator of the song professes a comical, absurd hatred for short people, claiming they got no reason to live. Newman's intent was to expose the sheer absurdity of prejudice by using height as a stand-in for race, religion, or any other arbitrary basis for discrimination. But the satire flew over the heads of millions. Radio stations were flooded with thousands of angry calls from listeners who thought Newman was genuinely promoting bigotry against short people. Organizations representing people with dwarfism spoke out against it. Faced with a PR nightmare, many stations banned the song to avoid the controversy. Newman tried to explain the joke, but for many, the damage was done. In a strange twist, the firestorm of publicity propelled the misunderstood song to number 2 on the Billboard charts, becoming his biggest hit ever. The public might be forgiven for misunderstanding Newman's satire, but the censorship of one of the decade's most beautiful ballads was simply baffling. In the early 1970s, America was a tense nation, deeply scarred by the Vietnam War and rising social unrest. Radio programmers were walking on eggshells, terrified of broadcasting anything that could be interpreted as violent. It was in this hypersensitive climate that Roberta Flack released Killing Me Softly with his song. The song is a romantic, melancholic masterpiece about the power of music to touch one's soul. The killing is entirely metaphorical, referring to being emotionally overwhelmed by a beautiful performance. But some radio programmers didn't see the metaphor. They saw the word killing in the title and panicked, fearing complaints from listeners who might misinterpret its meaning. Some stations pulled the song from their playlists. The bans were mostly short-lived, as it quickly became clear that the song was completely harmless. It went on to win a Grammy for Record of the Year, but its brief censorship remains a perfect example of how paranoia can lead to absurd conclusions. If misunderstanding a word like killing could get you banned, what would happen when artists started using words that everyone understood, but no one was supposed to say on the radio? By the mid-70s, the battle lines were clear, but sometimes the biggest controversies came from the smallest things, like a single, 4-letter word. Pink Floyd's 1973 masterpiece, The Dark Side of the Moon, included the track Money, a cynical critique of consumerism and greed. The song was brilliant, but it contained a landmine for radio programmers. The word bullsh.t. While profanity had been hinted at in songs before, this was direct, clear, and couldn't be misheard. It represented a major escalation in the war over explicit content. Most radio stations refused to play the uncensored album version. They were forced to use a promotional single, where the word was awkwardly edited out, or they created their own versions with a jarring bleep. Some stations banned it entirely, viewing any profanity as unacceptable regardless of artistic context. The controversy centered almost entirely on that one word, overshadowing the song's actual message and setting a new precedent for the lyrical battles that would define the decades to come. While Pink Floyd was banned for a single word, another band was censored for an entire idea. The 1974 hit "The Night Chicago Died" by Paper Lace was a dramatic story song about a fictional gun battle between police and Al Capone's gang. This was a unique case. The song wasn't about sex, it wasn't political, and it had no profanity. It was banned for glorifying violence. In an era of high crime rates, some radio stations, particularly in cities like Chicago, felt that a song romanticizing gangster shootouts was irresponsible and inappropriate. They pulled it from their playlists, concerned it was sending the wrong message to younger listeners. It was a clear example of how local sensitivities could dictate what an entire region was allowed to hear, proving that controversy didn't always come from the usual suspects. From sex to politics, from misunderstood words to forbidden ones, the censors had targeted nearly every aspect of human life. But there was one final frontier left to conquer, a topic so profound it would cause a backlash against one of the most beloved anthems ever written. How could a beautiful, simple plea for peace and unity become one of the most controversial songs of its time? In 1971, John Lennon released Imagine, a song that would become a global anthem for hope. Its message was gentle, its melody beautiful, but buried in its utopian verses were lines that, in the context of a deeply religious America embroiled in the Cold War, were seen as explosive. The controversy ignited over two key phrases. First, imagine there's no heaven, and no religion too. For religious broadcasters and listeners, this was a direct promotion of atheism, an attack on the very foundations of faith. Christian radio stations across the country banned it immediately. The second line, imagine there's no countries, was just as troubling for some. At the height of the Cold War, this was interpreted as an anti-patriotic sentiment, undermining national identity at a time of global tension. Conservative programmers saw it as dangerously naive, even subversive. Cease ultimate irony was lost on the censors. A song about bringing people together was banned for being divisive. Despite the resistance, its message of peace was too powerful to be contained, and it became one of the most beloved songs ever written. Looking back, the 1970s proved one thing beyond a shadow of a doubt: censorship is often the best marketing a song can ask for. The bans, the boycotts, and the moral panics rarely worked. Instead of silencing these artists, the controversy amplified their voices, turning their songs from mere records into powerful symbols of rebellion. These forbidden anthems spread through word of mouth, on underground radio, and through sheer human curiosity to hear what was deemed too dangerous for public consumption. The great irony is that many of these songs, once seen as a threat to civilization, are now considered classics, played on oldies stations without a second thought. Their revolutionary edges have been softened by time, but back then, they sparked fierce national debates about freedom, morality, and culture. The efforts to ban them backfired spectacularly, giving these artists a level of fame and notoriety that no marketing campaign could ever buy, and paving the way for the even more daring music that would follow. The songs that stirred controversy in the 70s didn't just define a decade, they proved that you can't silence authentic expression for long. If you enjoyed this trip back to the rebellious sounds of the 1970s, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more music history that challenges the official narrative. What's your favorite controversial song from this era? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your memories of when music was dangerous.